Tonight, a journalist walks into a building in Karachi, chasing a secret that powerful people have buried for years. Inside those dark corridors, hidden files, tortured prisoners, and corrupt officers guard a truth so dangerous that anyone who uncovers it may never walk out alive. But Faheem Siddiqui pressed record anyway. What he discovered behind those locked doors could shake the entire system of Karachi Police. And the most terrifying part, the people behind it are far more powerful than anyone ever imagined. Stay with this story until the end, because what happened that night inside Karachi will leave you shocked. The rain had just stopped over the restless city of Karachi. Water dripped slowly from broken streetlights. The night air smelled of wet concrete and diesel smoke. Faheem Siddiqui stood alone at the edge of a narrow alley near the aging walls of Karachi Central Jail. His hands trembled slightly as he checked the small recorder inside his pocket. The city never truly slept. But tonight the silence felt different. Heavy. Watching. Faheem had spent months chasing whispers about corruption buried deep inside the police system of Karachi Police. Missing evidence. Vanishing suspects. Secret payments that moved through dark corners of the city, like invisible ghosts. Many people warned him to stop. Some messages arrived without names. Some voices on the phone sounded calm, but carried a hidden threat. Yet Faheem kept searching, because every clue led to something darker, something nobody wanted exposed. A motorcycle roared past the empty street. Then silence returned. Faheem stepped deeper into the alley. The walls were covered with faded political posters and peeling paint. A single yellow bulb flickered above a rusted metal door. This was the place his anonymous source had mentioned. His heart pounded louder than the dripping water. The door creaked open slowly. A tall man stepped out from the darkness. His police uniform was partially hidden under a long black coat. His face remained half concealed by shadow. Faheem felt the cold air brush across his neck. The officer spoke quietly. "You came alone." Faheem nodded slowly. The officer glanced behind him toward the dark corridor inside the building. Voices echoed faintly from somewhere deep within. Metal clanged. Chains scraped across concrete. Faheem felt something twist inside his stomach. The officer leaned closer. His breath smelled of stale cigarettes and bitterness. "You want to know the truth about the system?" the officer whispered. "Then you must see it with your own eyes." Faheem followed him into the dim corridor. The smell inside the building was unbearable.
Sweat, rust, fear.
A single tube light buzzed above their heads. They passed several locked rooms. From one of them came a weak voice. A man begging for water. Faheem stopped walking. His chest tightened. The officer continued forward without emotion. They reached a heavy iron door. The officer pushed it open slowly. Inside the room stood 3 men in police uniforms. Their faces looked cold, emotionless. On the floor sat a young man with bruises covering his face. His hands were tied behind his back. Blood stained the concrete beneath him. Faheem felt the air leave his lungs. One officer lifted a file and tossed it onto a table. The papers scattered across the surface. Photographs, arrest records, cash transfer documents. Each page revealed another secret. Each photograph told another hidden story. Illegal detentions, fake encounters, bribes paid to bury investigations. Faheem felt the ground beneath him shift. The officer beside him whispered again. "This is only the surface. The truth is buried deeper than anyone imagines." Suddenly, the young prisoner on the floor lifted his head. His eyes locked directly onto Faheem. His voice trembled. "You must expose them." Before he could finish speaking, a loud metallic crash echoed down the hallway. The officers in the room froze. One of them slowly turned toward the corridor. Footsteps approached. Heavy, slow, deliberate. Faheem felt a cold wave of fear crawl up his spine. The door began to open again. And the man who stepped inside was someone Faheem recognized immediately. A powerful figure whose name appeared in every official press conference of Sindh Police. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air turned suffocating. The powerful officer looked directly at Faheem. A slow smile appeared on his face. Then he spoke in a calm voice that carried a terrifying certainty. So you're the journalist who believes he can expose everything. Faheem felt the recorder burning in his pocket. The truth was now standing in front of him, but the doors behind him slowly closed, and the locks clicked into place. The powerful officer stepped closer. His shadow swallowed the weak light of the room. Faheem realized something horrifying in that moment. He was no longer a witness. He had just become part of the secret. And somewhere deep inside the building another scream echoed through the darkness. The rain had just stopped over the restless city of Karachi. Water dripped slowly from broken streetlights that flickered above the empty road. The humid night air carried the smell of diesel, salt from the distant sea, and wet concrete. Faheem Siddiqui stood alone beside a narrow alley not far from the towering walls of Karachi's central jail. His jacket was damp from the rain. His fingers tightened around the small recorder hidden inside his pocket. The city sounded distant tonight. Usually the streets roared with traffic and impatient horns. But this street felt strangely silent, almost as if the darkness itself was listening. Faheem slowly checked his phone screen again. The message from his anonymous source still glowed faintly. Midnight. Come alone. Bring courage. For months Faheem had followed rumors buried deep inside the system of Karachi Police. At first they sounded like ordinary corruption stories. Small bribes, missing reports, quiet deals between officers and criminals. But the deeper he investigated, the darker the truth became. Witnesses vanished. Evidence disappeared from locked rooms. And several suspects who were supposed to be in custody simply vanished from official records. Faheem had interviewed families who waited outside police stations for days. Mothers who carried photographs of their missing sons. Brothers who whispered about midnight arrests that never appeared in any report. Every story pointed toward something hidden, something powerful, something dangerous. A sudden rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Faheem looked toward the end of the alley. A single yellow bulb flickered above a rusted metal door. That was the meeting point his source had described. His heartbeat grew louder with each step. The alley smelled of damp garbage and rust. Water dripped from tangled electrical wires hanging overhead. A stray dog watched him from the shadows with glowing eyes. Faheem reached the metal door and hesitated. For a moment he wondered if this was a trap. But then the door slowly creaked open from inside. A tall man stepped into the dim light. His police uniform was partially hidden beneath a dark coat. His face remained half concealed by shadow. The officer looked left and right before speaking. You came alone. Faheem nodded quietly. The officer studied him for a long moment. His eyes looked tired, almost haunted. Then he stepped aside and motioned toward the dark corridor behind him. If you want the truth, you must see it yourself. Faheem stepped inside. The door closed behind them with a heavy metallic sound. The corridor stretched deep into the building. A flickering tube light buzzed above their heads. The smell inside the building was unbearable.
Sweat. Dust.
Old blood. The officer walked ahead without speaking. Their footsteps echoed against the cracked walls. As they passed several locked doors, Faheem heard faint sounds from inside. Someone coughing violently. Someone whispering weak prayers. Someone crying for water. Faheem felt a cold knot forming inside his stomach. They finally stopped in front of a thick iron door. The officer pushed it open slowly. Inside the room, 3 other policemen stood around a metal table. Their faces looked hard and expressionless. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling. On the floor sat a young man with bruises covering his face. His shirt was torn. His hands were tied tightly behind his back. Dark stains spread across the concrete beneath him. Faheem struggled to breathe normally. One officer lifted a thick file from the table and dropped it in front of Faheem. The papers scattered across the surface. Photographs, arrest reports, financial documents. Every page revealed another hidden crime. Illegal detentions that never appeared in official records. Fake encounter reports written after suspects were already dead. Money transfers moving between criminals and high-ranking officers. Faheem felt the weight of the truth pressing against his chest. This was bigger than corruption. This was an entire system built on fear. The officer beside him leaned closer and whispered quietly, "This is only the beginning. The real power sits far above these rooms. Suddenly the prisoner on the floor slowly lifted his head. His swollen eyes focused directly on Faheem. His voice trembled with pain. "You must show this to the world." Before he could say anything more, a loud metallic crash echoed through the hallway outside. Every officer in the room froze instantly. One of them slowly turned toward the door. Heavy footsteps approached from the corridor.
Slow.
Confident. Dangerous. Faheem felt a cold wave run through his spine. The iron door began to open again. A tall figure stepped into the room. The moment Faheem saw his face, his stomach dropped. This was not just another officer. This was a powerful name that appeared regularly in official press conferences of Sindh Police. The man slowly looked around the room. His eyes stopped on Faheem. A slow smile appeared on his face. The atmosphere inside the room turned suffocating. The powerful officer walked closer step by step. His polished shoes echoed against the concrete floor. "So, you are the journalist searching for secrets." His voice sounded calm, almost amused. Faheem felt the recorder burning inside his pocket. Every instinct told him the danger was growing with every second. Behind him, the heavy door quietly closed. Then the metal lock snapped into place. Faheem realized something terrifying in that moment. No one outside knew he was here. The officer stopped directly in front of him. His shadow swallowed the weak light of the room. "You came looking for the truth," the officer said softly. "But the truth inside this building has a price." Faheem glanced toward the injured prisoner. The young man looked terrified. Another scream suddenly echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. It sounded distant, but full of agony. The powerful officer slowly turned his head toward the corridor. Then he looked back at Faheem again. His smile slowly faded. "Tonight you will see how deep this system truly goes." And far below the building, another metal door slammed shut. The rain had just stopped over the restless city of Karachi. Water slid slowly from broken streetlights and gathered in dark puddles along the empty road. The night air felt heavy with humidity, diesel smoke, and the distant smell of the sea. Faheem Siddiqui stood quietly at the mouth of a narrow alley. Behind him, the restless city stretched endlessly with its flickering lights and distant sirens. In front of him, the alley looked silent, dark, and waiting. His hand rested inside his jacket pocket. The small recorder, hidden there, felt warm against his palm. He had checked it 3 times already. Tonight, every second mattered. For months, Faheem had followed dangerous whispers connected to the powerful system of Karachi Police. At first, the rumors sounded ordinary. Small bribes, missing evidence, cases quietly closed without explanation. But the deeper Faheem searched, the darker the trail became. Witnesses suddenly refused to speak. Families of suspects claimed their relatives were taken during midnight raids. Yet no arrest reports existed. No official records. Just silence.
And fear.
One mother had shown him a photograph of her son. Her hands shook as she spoke. She said officers took him from their house 3 weeks earlier. They promised he would return after questioning. But no police station admitted holding him. Faheem still remembered the emptiness in her eyes. That moment pushed him deeper into the investigation. Then the anonymous message arrived. "Midnight. Come alone, if you want the truth." The message led him to this street not far from the tall walls of Karachi Central Jail. A weak yellow bulb flickered above a rusted metal door at the end of the alley. Faheem slowly walked toward it. His footsteps echoed softly against the wet pavement. A stray dog lifted its head from a pile of trash and watched him pass. The closer he moved to the door, the louder his heartbeat sounded. For a moment, he wondered if this meeting was a trap. But turning back now meant abandoning the truth. And he had come too far to stop. As he reached the door, it suddenly creaked open from inside. A tall man stepped forward from the darkness. His police uniform was partially hidden under a long black coat. Only half his face appeared under the weak light. The officer studied Faheem carefully. "You came alone." His voice sounded low and cautious. Faheem nodded slowly. The officer glanced behind him toward the empty street. Then he stepped aside. "Come inside quickly." The door closed behind them with a heavy metallic thud. A long, narrow corridor stretched into darkness ahead. Dim tube lights buzzed faintly above cracked walls. The air inside felt thick and suffocating. It carried the smell of sweat, rust, and something darker. Something metallic. The officer walked ahead, without speaking. Faheem followed him carefully. Their footsteps echoed through the empty hall. They passed several locked doors along the corridor. From one room came the sound of someone coughing violently. From another came a weak voice begging for water. Faheem slowed his steps. His chest tightened with unease. The officer did not turn back. He simply continued walking forward. Finally, they stopped before a heavy iron door. The officer pushed it open slowly. Inside the room, 3 policemen stood around a metal table. Their expressions looked cold and emotionless. A single bulb swung gently from the ceiling. On the floor sat a young man with his hands tied behind his back. Bruises covered his face. His shirt was torn and stained. Blood marked the concrete beneath him. Faheem felt the air leave his lungs. One officer grabbed a thick file from the table and dropped it in front of him. The papers scattered across the surface. Photographs, arrest reports, financial records. Each page revealed another hidden crime. Illegal detentions that never appeared in official records. Fake encounter reports written after suspects were already dead. Money transfers connecting criminals with powerful officers. Faheem felt his stomach twist painfully. This was not just corruption. This was a machine built on fear and silence. The officer beside him leaned closer and spoke quietly. This building hides many truths, but the real power controlling everything is much higher. Suddenly, the injured prisoner on the floor lifted his head. His eyes locked onto Faheem with desperate urgency. His voice trembled. "You must expose them before more people disappear." Before he could say anything more, a loud metallic crash echoed down the hallway. Every officer in the room froze instantly. Heavy footsteps approached slowly from outside. Each step sounded calm, confident, powerful. Faheem felt cold sweat forming along his neck. The iron door slowly opened again. A tall figure stepped into the room. The moment Faheem saw his face, his heart skipped a beat. This man appeared regularly in official press briefings of Sindh Police. A respected authority, a powerful voice in the system. The man calmly scanned the room. His eyes stopped on Faheem. A slow smile appeared on his face. The atmosphere instantly became suffocating. The officer walked closer step by step. His polished shoes echoed sharply on the concrete floor. "So, you are the journalist chasing stories in dark places." His voice sounded calm and controlled. Faheem felt the recorder inside his pocket pressing against his hand. Every instinct warned him the danger had just multiplied. Behind him, the iron door quietly closed. Then the heavy lock snapped shut. Faheem realized something terrifying. No one outside knew he was here. The powerful officer stopped directly in front of him. His shadow swallowed the weak light in the room. "You came searching for the truth hidden inside this building," the officer said slowly. "But the truth here belongs to people who protect it at any cost." Suddenly, another scream echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. The sound carried pure agony. The officer turned his head slightly toward the corridor. Then he looked back at Faheem again. His expression had become colder. "Tonight you will see how deep this system truly goes." And somewhere far below the building, another heavy door slammed shut while footsteps began moving upward toward them. The rain began again over the dark streets of Karachi. Soft drops tapped against the cracked windows of the old building. Inside the room, the silence felt heavier than before. Faheem Siddiqui stood motionless as the powerful officer stared directly into his eyes. The dim light above them flickered once. The injured prisoner on the floor struggled to breathe quietly. The other officers watched without speaking. The powerful officer slowly walked around the table. His calm footsteps echoed through the room. "You came looking for the truth." His voice sounded almost patient. "But the truth is dangerous when the wrong person finds it." Faheem felt the recorder pressing against his palm inside his pocket. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. For a moment, fear tried to take control of his thoughts. But then he remembered the families he had met. The mothers waiting outside police stations. The brothers searching through court records. The people whose voices had been buried by silence. Faheem slowly raised his head. "The truth belongs to the people." His voice sounded steady despite the tension. The powerful officer smiled again. A cold smile, without warmth. He gestured toward the scattered files on the table. You think these papers will change anything? Systems like this do not collapse because of one story. Faheem remained silent. But inside his pocket the recorder continued capturing every word, every threat, every confession hidden inside their conversation. The officer suddenly stepped closer. Close enough that Faheem could see the faint scar across his cheek. Then listen carefully. The officer said quietly. This building contains secrets that could destroy many careers. Judges, politicians, officers, men who hold power far beyond this room. Exposing them will not be easy. Faheem slowly pulled his hand from his pocket. The small recorder appeared in his palm. The room fell completely silent. One of the officers cursed under his breath. The powerful officer stared at the recorder for a long moment. Then his smile slowly disappeared. You are either very brave or very foolish. Faheem placed the recorder gently on the metal table. The red recording light blinked steadily. The truth is already recorded, he said calmly. Outside this building, my editor already knows where I am. If I do not return the story, will still reach the public. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in the officer's expression. The men in the room glanced at each other nervously. Rain continued tapping against the windows. The injured prisoner slowly lifted his head again. Hope flickered faintly in his tired eyes. The powerful officer looked around the room slowly. Then he let out a long breath. The system you want to expose is larger than you imagine. But every system eventually cracks. His voice sounded quieter now, almost thoughtful. He picked up one of the scattered files from the table. For years, many people buried these secrets. Maybe it is time someone finally opens the door. The other officers looked confused. One of them stepped forward. Sir, we cannot allow this. The powerful officer raised his hand. Silence returned immediately. He looked back at Faheem. Take your recorder. Take your story. But remember something important. The truth does not only expose monsters. Sometimes it also exposes the fear that allowed them to exist. Faheem slowly picked up the recorder. His hand still trembled slightly. But inside his chest something stronger than fear had appeared. Determination. The powerful officer walked toward the iron door. He unlocked it slowly. The corridor outside looked just as dark as before.
Go,
he said quietly, before someone else in this building decides differently. Faheem stepped into the corridor. The distant cries inside the building still echoed through the halls. He knew many stories remained hidden here. But tonight one truth had finally escaped. He walked through the hallway and pushed open the metal exit door. Cool rain touched his face as he stepped back onto the street. The city lights of Karachi shimmered across the wet pavement. Cars moved again in the distance. Life continued as if nothing had happened. Faheem looked down at the recorder in his hand. Inside it lived the voices of the hidden rooms, the secrets of the system, the truth that many people feared. He placed the recorder safely inside his jacket. Then he began walking toward the waiting city lights. Because by morning the story would begin spreading across newsrooms, across screens, across conversations, and somewhere inside the powerful halls of Sindh, police people would begin to realize something unsettling. The silence protecting their secrets had finally been broken. And once the truth begins to speak, it rarely stops.